Hey everyone, I'm Zuki and welcome to this podcast. For those of you who live in democratic countries or those of you who read politics in various democracies across the globe, you may have heard of this question. How can someone vote against their own interest? It's an interesting question that people ask a lot whenever there is a democratic election and maybe they don't agree with the side that won the election. They would say, how can you vote against your own interest? And this is an interesting question, and I'll be exploring that question in this episode. So I'll be talking about identity and ideology in politics. And this is the thing about identity. The thing about humans is that we want to belong somewhere. Whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it's tribe, whether it's clan, we want to belong. We feel like we need that identity to belong somewhere. And so if you are to look at Western countries, Western civilizations, especially like the Canada or the United States, you'll notice something about identity in politics, and also you'll notice something about ideology in politics. So as far as ideology is concerned, in the West, you notice ideologies are divided into two, that is liberal ideologies and conservative ideologies. Now when you go to the developing world, especially Africa, you realize there is less ideology in politics and more identity. And so you may wonder, how comes identity is such a common thing? It's the most primal thing in the most important thing in developing democracies, but in the West it's more of ideology politics. So the thing is, in the West, you have most of these countries, they are a bit homogeneous in terms of identity. So when I say homogeneous in this case, I mean most of the people in these countries belong to they have the same identity, whether it's race, religion, tribe. And because of that, identity is not that important in politics, because if you are all the same, if you all identify with the same groups, then what will be the point of making that a big issue in politics? So now you are left with ideology, and ideologies are a bit rational, they're logical. If you look at ideologies like gun control, pro-life, pro-choice, those things, you realize they are based on some fundamental logic and rational thought. But when it comes to identity, there is emotional attachment. So if it's a race, if it's tribe, if it's clan, if it's religion, there's a lot of emotion involved in building that. If you look at developing countries, especially Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, you'll notice there's a lot of identity politics. In fact, there is no much ideology that goes on in sub-Saharan democracies. You realize it's just identity. That's why it's so easy for someone to just move from one party to another in African democracies. Unlike the West, it's unheard of for someone to just say, I'm no longer a Republican, I'm a Democrat today, and someone else to say, I no longer care about liberal politics, I'm a conservative now. That's unheard of. But in African democracies, it's so easy for someone to just switch from one party to another, because they are not based on ideologies. It's all about identity. So because you have these, the societies, the communities in sub-Saharan Africa, they are not homogeneous. They're not majorly homogeneous like the West. There's so much identity going on. So you have clans, you have tribes, you have religion. So they shape your beliefs such that ideologies don't have as much power as identity. So it's important to understand that identity always trumps ideology. So identity comes first and then ideology, because identity is based on survival. From evolutionary perspective, we realize that humans needed to be together, to belong to certain groups so that they can survive, to belong to a community to survive. And that has been the case for thousands of years. So looking at democracies in sub-Saharan Africa, you realize because of different cultures, different religions, different tribes, different clans, you still have that identity issue at the center of these politics. And the challenge with that is, since identity is based on emotional attachment, you're attached to this group and you feel like, I need to belong to this group, because humans feel the need to belong to a group because it's necessary for survival. So because of that, ideologies are not that important. So as I said, identity trumps ideology. And because of that, no matter how good of a politician you think you are, even if you have great ideas that you think they can transform your country, since identity comes first, those ideologies will always be ignored. So people will just say, I'm going to vote for this person because we are the same. I identify with this person. Maybe their tribe, maybe their religion. So how does this identity keep being at the center of African politics and other developing democracies, even though we are living in modern times? How does it keep being at the center of the politics? And the answer is, it's the best tool to use in a democracy, the identity. Because if you look at how most politicians operate, you realize they use this, you divide and conquer. So if you can divide the people into groups, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's tribe, they're easy to control, and you realize you don't need a lot of them to support you to win, because you have already divided them into groups. So you don't really have a good opposition because they are already divided into groups. So identity becomes a big tool that you can use in these countries, in this economy, in these democracies, to make sure that even with bad leadership qualities, you can still win an election fairly by just playing around with identity. But with ideology, you have to really have a good idea, and for that idea to be more powerful than identity, it can be a bit challenging. And so you are left with playing around with identities to win an election. And if you carefully look at African politics, you'll realize it's all about identity. Where do I belong? I belong to this group. And ideologies are not that important. And one way they do it, they use the media, so that the media will always push that narrative that this group doesn't like us, they're not like us, we are different, and so we have to stick together. So even though you are not providing any good leadership to the people you are convincing to stick together, because of fear of losing that identity, they will still choose to vote for you. So it becomes more of, they are politics of fear. You use that fear of losing my group, my identity, to the other side, because they have to be us versus them in identity politics for it to make sense. So the thing, even with ideology, you can still play around with identity to push certain ideologies. So identity, you put identity at the center, and then you come up with ideologies that you push around. But it is not the ideology you are selling, it is the identity that us, our group, and their group, we can't be the same, we can't be on the same table. So we have to stick together so that we can defeat the other side, because they don't like us and they're not like us. And the truth about that is, you end up having to ask that question. how do people keep voting against their own interest? How can a sane person vote against their own interest? And people will keep doing that because identity is always more powerful than ideology. So at the end of the day, people will try to belong to a certain clique, whether it's tribe, whether it's religion, and that's what makes politics so difficult. When you have a group of people who are heterogeneous in nature, they don't share the same cultural values, the same religion, the same race, the same ethnic characteristics, they tend to have those divisions. That's why it's so easy to divide countries where you have so many ethnic groups, because they can't be on the same page because of those identities. And that's a challenge, that's a problem that arises from the way Africa was partitioned. The way Africa was partitioned during the colonial period. The way it was partitioned, people were forced to be around people they may not share same cultural beliefs, and because of that, it brought that issue of those identity differences. Now, because we are already there, we already live with people who are different, who have different values, different cultures. We can't talk about now trying to go back to a homogeneous society, because then that's just absurd and it's not practical. So the best way to fix that is just to find a way to exist together in these different identities, and find a way for our ideologies to trump this identity. But the truth is that will take time, that will be difficult, but I hope at some point it will be easy for people to value ideologies of identity. But until then, this will always be a challenge. There's always be a problem whereby we can't have similar ideologies, because even if we share the same ideologies, for example, even if people want the same thing, the identity will always be more important, and they will end up choosing something different. So I believe this will always be a challenge, and the answer to that question always lies in identity versus ideology. So that's why in the West they tend to focus more on ideology, because most Western countries, they have that homogeneous ethnic setup. So it helps. It helps with the ideology, because when you are all the same, then there's no need for identity, because you're all the same. Why should we worry about identity? That's just an issue in places where people are not the same, and it arises from the colonial period. So I believe that answers the question why people tend to keep voting against their own interest. The answer is the basic answer is identity trumps ideology always. So thank you for listening. As I come to the close of this episode, I hope you get the answer to that question, and you also understand why some democracies tend to have these problems compared to others, especially in developing countries like developing parts of the world like Africa and some parts of Asia. The challenge arises from identity, and if people want to fix these things, if people want to come up with better solutions as far as democracy is concerned, they'll have to go back to identity and try to deal with that. Otherwise, the problem will always persist. So thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next episode. If you resonate with these ideas, I hope you subscribe to this channel so that you can continue getting more content like this. Thank you for watching.